For viewers watching here in the US and around the world, you are looking at the 3 Israeli hostages being released today as part of this latest round of the ceasefire. Gaza militants releasing 3 hostages in exchange for 369 Palestinians. Right now, those hostages are speaking. We're not going to take that sound. We're not going to bring that sound to you live because they may be speaking under duress. But I do want to welcome in a guest, AMIR, TIBON, a senior columnist with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz and author of the book The Gates of Gaza, a story of betrayal, survival and hope on Israel's borderlands. We appreciate your time. I know you and your family survived the October 7th Hamas terror attack. And unlike you had plenty of neighbors, of course, who were killed, who were abducted. Just give us a sense of your feeling today seeing these 3 young men being released.
Well, it's a moment of joy for everybody in Israel, and especially for the community of Kibbutz Nir Oz, from which these 3 were kidnapped, and for their families. But it's also a moment of great concern, because while we are celebrating today the release of these 3 hostages, we still have 73 hostages left in the hands of Hamas in Gaza, and we don't know what will happen next. This hostage release deal, which was signed just a month ago after strong pressure from President Trump and his special envoy, Stephen Witkoff, is now in uncertain territory. Are we going into the next phase? Will the other 73 be released? There are strong forces inside the Israeli government who are pushing against the continuation of the deal. I know it's hard to understand because you saw the pictures in Tel Aviv now. The joy of the Israeli people celebrating the release of our hostages, the return of our brothers to their families. How can anyone speak up against it? And yet we have very powerful politicians in our own government working day and night to derail this agreement and to make sure that it doesn't continue into the next phase. And this is going to be a major political battle in Israel in the coming days to make sure that these pictures continue, that we see more hostages returning to their families, and really a path to end this tragedy, to end this painful saga, and in a way to end October 7th. Because until the last hostage returns to their family, for so many people in Israel, including people like my family and our friends who survived, the date remains October 7th.
And of course, Amir, just a few days ago, this exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners looked doubtful at best. Hamas said Israel had violated the terms of the ceasefire by not allowing enough aid in terms of shelter, and that it would indefinitely suspend the release. A lot of threats followed. What do you believe put this release back on track?
There was a crisis around some specific elements of the ceasefire agreement that Hamas claimed were not being implemented by Israel. And there was a very quick and effective intervention by Mr. Witkoff, by the Qatari and Egyptian governments. These are basically the mediators in order to resolve this issue and allow the release of these 3 men today. And that's wonderful news. And we need the people who are committed to this agreement, like Mr. Witkoff, to keep pushing, to keep insisting, and to make sure that the deal is implemented until the last hostage returns to their family. And I want to address very quickly what President Trump said this week, where he said he wants to see all the hostages come out and no small groups of them every few days. I think there is a way to achieve this. There is a way to get a bigger deal. It demands political courage. It demands a decision to go for one grand deal, all the hostages in one stroke, in return for a certain amount of prisoners and an official end of the Gaza war. And if President Trump will decide to push for this idea, he will have somewhat of a confrontation with Prime Minister Netanyahu, but I think he will be able to achieve it. It's a question of, does he actually want to do it?
Right now, we're just looking at pictures of the 3 Israeli hostages being released from southern Gaza. from Khan Yunis. It is Sagi Dakuchen, 36-year-old, whose third daughter was born just a couple of months after he was taken hostage. Sasha Trufanov, whose family members were also taken and released back in November. And of course, Yehorn, who was an Israeli Argentinian. His brother is still being held. And of course, his brother is not on the list of the 33 hostages set to be released in this first phase of this very fragile ceasefire. But to you, Amir, your father became an outspoken critic of Netanyahu. From your perspective and from his, has Netanyahu failed the families of those killed or those still in captivity?
I will just say what many of the families are saying. You don't need to ask me. You don't need to ask my family. We have our own story. But let's listen to the hostage families. Okay, let's listen to the families of those who are not included in the list of phase one of the deal, but are expecting their loved ones. And they are saying loud and clear, the Prime Minister should not succumb to the fanatics and the extremists in his government. And he should not place his political survival above the survival of the hostages. We need to move along with this agreement and get all the hostages released. This is the top priority of a vast majority of the Israeli public. And with President Trump in office, Israel will have 4 years to push for better security conditions in the Middle East, to push for new agreements with important countries in the region like Saudi Arabia. Right now, the only thing that we should rush to do and waste no time in doing is to release the hostages, because every passing day presents a grave danger to their lives. And by the way, also those who are dead. If we are now going to resume the war, we may lose their bodies and their families will be left forever in doubt with no answers. So the only thing that is urgent is to do this deal and complete it.
We appreciate your time, Amir TIBON, today. Thank you very much for joining us. If viewers are just joining us here in the US and around the world, you're just looking at vision right now of the Red Cross vehicles with the 3 Israeli hostages that have been held in Gaza for some 498 days, finally able to leave Gaza and head back to Israel. I want to return now to our Nick Robertson, who's in Tel Aviv, PAULA HANCOCKS, who is in Abu Dhabi. And Nick, to you, these Red Cross vehicles have picked up these 3 hostages who certainly they seem at least in a better condition than the 3 released last weekend. Where will these vehicles head?
They'll head to an exit point out of Gaza where they'll be handed over to the IDF. I have to say, Yair Horn, the 46-year-old Argentinian Israeli, he looked as if he had lost some weight. I mean, you compare the pictures, the before, if you will, and the after, he has lost weight. Less so, perhaps, the other 2, but a huge cheer here in Hosted Square when the 3 of them got inside the Red Cross vehicles, because that really does formalize, if you will, the end of their captivity in the hands of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're now in the hands of the Red Cross. They're now on their way out. They're not on Israeli soil, if you will, yet. They're not in the hands of the IDF yet, of Israeli authorities. They're with the Red Cross, but it formalizes the end of their captivity and this long path to recovery, and a relatively short path to be in the arms of their loved ones really is now underway. And as we've seen in previous weekends and other days when there have been releases, this will happen in fairly fast pace. The images that will accompany it take a little bit longer, but very soon they will be outside of Gaza. They will be handed over formally by the Red Cross to the IDF. Doctors' checks are taken for processing before they then go on to hospital facilities and begin that process of medical, physical, spiritual and mental recovery, if you will.
Yeah, no doubt a long recovery for these 3 young men returning now to Israel. PAULA HANCOCKS, if you're with us in Abu Dhabi, I want to go to you because we're looking at those pictures of the stage where these Israeli hostages were brought before being released. And of course, just in the last couple of weeks, we've heard Donald Trump speaking about taking control of the Gaza Strip, saying that the U.S. will own it. The Hamas soldiers and the militants there in Gaza certainly look in control of the situation, having recruited more soldiers. And they had a sign behind them, a big banner in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. It said, "No migration except to Jerusalem." It certainly doesn't seem like they would be willing to leave their homeland, Paula.
Absolutely not, and any Palestinian that we have spoken to within Gaza as well has said that it's simply not an option. I mean, it was as clear a response from Hamas that to the US president that you could see when they had that poster saying no migration except to Jerusalem, directly negating what the US president said, that he believed that the solution was to displace the Palestinians in Gaza, to rebuild Gaza, to make it the Riviera of the Middle East, as he put it, and then has said a number of times that he does not foresee Palestinians being allowed back to Gaza, but they would be settled elsewhere. Now, this across the board, whether you're speaking to a militant, a civilian, this has been rejected in Gaza. It has also been widely rejected across the Arab region. We have heard from many within the Middle East, the leaders themselves, that this is simply not something that is acceptable. Saudi Arabia, the country that the US president wants to woo to be able to try and normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, was one of the first to respond after President Trump said this, saying that the only option is a two-state solution. The option of Palestinian statehood has to be the way forward. So this has been very clearly rejected inside Gaza and across the region at large. But to your other point, Linda, yes, Hamas looks very much in control today. This is what we have seen and what we have discussed as well in recent weeks with the prisoner, the hostage releases as well, that the Hamas, and on this particular occasion and in the past alongside another militant group, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, are very much in control. They're controlling the crowds. They are the ones that are talking to the International Red Cross. You have a member of Hamas is the person on stage with the Red Cross signing the documents which officially appear to be the declaration that these hostages will be released. And they're very clear in the message that they are sending. We also see in these pictures some of the weapons they are holding are Israeli weapons, clearly having been taken either in the heat of battle or they have been left behind, but they are showing that there is one power that is in control in Gaza at this point. They're not the images that the Israeli government will want to be seeing. We have heard repeatedly from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Hamas has to be completely destroyed. That is his stated war goal, and it has been really since day one. Every time there is a hostage release, it is very clear that that stated goal has not been accomplished. Now, of course, we have to preface this with we are just seeing one small pocket of Gaza. We're seeing one small pocket of Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza. We can't say whether this is the case across the whole of the Gaza Strip, but certainly when it comes to these hostage releases, Hamas is very much in control, and that is the image, the message that they are sending across the world.